My name is Clara. I am 30 years old, living in the quiet heart of Colorado, tucked inside a small apartment in Denver. This Christmas, I thought the season would arrive as it always had, family gathered around a glowing tree, laughter spilling across the dinner table, plates filled with roasted turkey and cranberry sauce. But instead, what came was only a short message from my mother. 8 words. Just your sister's family this year. Keeping it small. 8 words. And with them, a flood of years came crashing back. As if all those moments I tried to bury had only been waiting in the shadows. That familiar sting of being the one left out. The Christmas mornings with nothing under the tree for me. The nights when my name was never spoken with pride. And always, the comparisons to my sister. Lillian, the golden child, the flawless one. The girl who could do no wrong. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I typed a single word in reply. Enjoy. But inside me, something shifted. I couldn't sit in this apartment again, staring at the ceiling while the city outside glowed with lights that never belonged to me. I had something they didn't know about. A mountain retreat in Aspen, worth $5 million, hidden from the eyes of my family. A place I had built piece by piece, not for show, but as proof. Proof that I was strong enough to create my own table when theirs had no seat for me. This year, I whispered to myself, would be different. I would not spend it alone. I would open those doors to the ones who knew rejection, the ones who, like me, had been pushed aside. Together, we would write a new kind of Christmas. Not one centered around Lillian's halo, but one where every person mattered. And so I ask you now, as you listen, have you ever been pushed away by your own family? Have you ever felt the sting of being invisible in a room where you should have belonged? If so, I want you to stay with me through this story. Because what happened next, I believe, might feel like something you've been waiting to hear all along. I remember it so clearly. From childhood onward, my life was always measured against hers. In my parents' eyes, Lillian was the shining star. Graceful, popular, the endless source of pride they paraded before relatives and neighbors. And me? I was simply Clara, her sister. That one line became my whole identity. Nothing more than a shadow following her light. The holidays, those days when families are supposed to draw closer, always made me ache more than any other time. I can still see myself at 14, seated cross-legged near the tree, the room glittering with ornaments and strings of gold. My parents handed Lillian a delicate bracelet, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "You deserve this, darling. You've made us proud." I forced a smile, my eyes searching desperately for a small box, maybe with my name scribbled in the corner. But when the last ribbon fell to the floor, it became clear. There was nothing for me. My mother glanced at me with a guilty expression. "You're older now, Clara. You don't need toys anymore." I nodded as though it didn't matter. But inside, something cracked. That crack widened every year. When Lillian became cheer captain, the family threw a party with balloons and cake. When I won first place at the science fair, my mother only muttered, "That's nice, but don't stay up too late." My father didn't even bother to glance at my project. His voice was too busy bragging about Lillian to the neighbors. Each time I tried to speak, my words hung in the air like smoke no one bothered to breathe. I remember showing my mother a radio I had fixed from scrap parts. She gave me a faint smile and told me to help Lillian get ready for a party. Through the years, I shrank myself. Instead of fighting, I retreated. The garage became my world, the smell of metal, the hiss of a soldering iron, the crackle of wires sparking to life. I built things no one cared to see. And yet, it was in those hours that I found pieces of myself. Still, the question carved itself deep into my mind. Am I really just the unnecessary child? That question stayed with me for years. Even when I received a full scholarship at 17 to one of the most prestigious universities in the country, my father's only words were, "Stanford? That's so far away. Are you sure? Lillian will be close to home, so convenient." Even in my brightest moment, they saw only how far I strayed from the orbit of their perfect daughter. When I stepped onto campus for the first time, suitcase in hand and heart pounding with a mix of nerves and pride, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the moment I'd finally proven my worth. A full scholarship to Stanford University. It was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about. The kind of thing families usually celebrated. But my family? They didn't see it as an achievement. They saw it as distance, as inconvenience, as one more reminder that I didn't fit the mold. My years there were nothing like the glossy brochures or the smiling faces you see in college movies. They were a blur of studying by day, working by night, and surviving however I could. The scholarship covered tuition. Yes, but books, housing, food, that was all on me. I slept on couches in cramped apartments, my backpack serving as a pillow. Dinner was often a packet of noodles cracked raw, eaten dry because it was faster and cheaper than boiling water. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I found leftover pizza at the end of a shift. Yet in those lean years, I found resilience. And in resilience, I found direction. Technology and logistics became my compass. I discovered that what others overlooked, organization, systems, the way things move and connect, was where I thrived. At 23, I launched my first company. A small startup, nothing glamorous. Just a platform built to streamline freight transportation. At the time, it felt impossible. Investors turned me away. Colleagues laughed at the idea of a young woman with no connections, no powerful last name, trying to fix an industry run by giants. There were nights when the bank account showed a balance smaller than a single paycheck owed to my employees. I begged for meetings, knocked on doors, chased down any chance to keep the company alive. One night, when payroll was due and the account was nearly empty, I stayed awake for 3 nights straight negotiating with a small hospital. If they said no, the company would collapse. By some miracle, they agreed to try our service. That contract didn't make us rich, but it kept us breathing. Then the world shifted. The pandemic struck. Hospitals were drowning. Supplies vanished. Masks, gloves, ventilators, every box, every shipment suddenly meant the difference between life and death. And that's when our platform became more than an idea. It became a lifeline. We built a system to track demand and supply in real time. If a shipment of masks sat unused in Texas, we rerouted it to New York, where doctors were begging. If ventilators were stranded in Kansas, they reached hospitals in Chicago within hours. My team and I worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee, exhaustion, and sheer willpower. Within 1 year, our system served over 50 health networks across the country. Reporters called us the nervous system of the medical supply chain. I was named to Forbes' list of 30 under 30, standing on that stage with a plaque in my trembling hands. And yet, even as I stood there, I wondered if my parents would ever read the article. Would they even care? The answer was simple. Number: when a Fortune 500 corporation offered to acquire the company for $120 million, It took me a full week to believe the number was real. I signed the papers, walked out into the evening light, and realized I had just stepped out of years of hunger and fear. I finally had freedom. But freedom did not erase the ache of invisibility. Months later, I returned home with an elegant gift from New York, ready to share my triumph. Instead, I sat through an evening where every word, every cheer, was for Lillian, who had just started at a law firm in Boston. My father dismissed my company with a laugh. That's technology. Hard to understand. Let's go back to Lillian. I sat there, holding my gift quietly in my lap, staring at the Christmas lights. I had survived on instant noodles. I had built a company worth millions, and yet in that house, none of it mattered. I was still only Clara, the forgotten one, the unnecessary child. So when the deal was done, I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't throw lavish parties. I didn't fly to Paris just to post pictures of champagne on rooftops. I bought something else. Something I had never truly had in my life. A home where no one could push me aside. In Aspen, Colorado, I found it. A valley covered in snow, framed by mountains that stretched endlessly into the sky. There, I bought 42 acres of land, tucked away, quiet, mine. It wasn't just real estate, it was a declaration that I would never again be measured by the shadow of someone else. The property had been listed quietly, owned by a wealthy family preparing to move overseas. $5 million. That was the number on the contract. But to me, it wasn't about money. It was about carving a place in the world where I finally belonged. From the moment I signed the papers, I felt something lift off my chest, something that had pressed against me since childhood. For the first time, I wasn't the girl shoved to the corner of the family table. I was the woman building a table of her own. I hired local architects, builders, and artisans, but I was involved in every single detail. Not because I wanted to flaunt wealth, but because this house was more than a building. It was a promise to the little girl who once waited under the Christmas tree for a gift that never came. The lodge rose in cedar wood, its beams releasing a soft fragrance whenever the sunlight touched them. The front doors opened into a grand hall where ceilings soared high above and a granite fireplace big enough for a person to step into commanded the room. A chandelier crafted from raw pine logs hung proudly in the center, casting warm golden light over the polished floors. The living room walls were made entirely of glass, floor to ceiling, framing an unbroken view of the snow-capped mountains. Every morning, when the sun broke over the peaks, the light spilled across the frozen landscape like diamonds scattering across ice. Behind the lodge, I dug a private lake and filled it with salmon and sturgeon, imagining summer days with a fishing rod in hand and winter nights watching the surface freeze into a perfect mirror reflecting the violet sky. Inside, I designed 10 bedrooms, each with its own fireplace and balcony. The kitchen gleamed with black granite counters and a walnut island carved from a single slab of wood. Cast iron pans lined the walls, gifts from a local chef I had hired as a consultant. The furniture wasn't flashy or gilded. Instead, I chose heavy oak tables, brown leather sofas, and hand-woven rugs from the Navajo Valley. Every choice breathed warmth and sincerity. I didn't want this place to scream wealth. I wanted it to whisper belonging. And I told no one. Not my parents. Not even Lillian. I shared no photos online. When friends asked where I disappeared for weekends, I only smiled and said I was busy with a project, because I knew what would happen if the family discovered it. They would twist it, reduce it, drape it in Lillian's name like they always had. She just got lucky, they'd say. She couldn't have done it without help. Or worse, they would make it about her somehow, as though she had inspired me all along. I refused to let that happen. This lodge was mine. Entirely mine. During construction, I often stayed in Aspen for days at a time, sleeping on a makeshift pine bed in rooms that still smelled of sawdust. At night, I wrapped myself in blankets and stood on the balcony, watching the mountains glow under silver moonlight. Those moments reminded me of childhood, when I would stand outside our porch, watching my family laugh inside without me. But now, it was different. I was no longer the outsider. I was creating a world of my own. When the last nail was hammered, when the final stone was polished, I walked slowly through each room, brushing my hand across the furniture, the door frames, the tables. One thought echoed through my mind. This is my home. Not the home of the forgotten daughter. Not the place where Lillian was the measure of worth. My home. My sanctuary. My domain. I promised myself that one day, I would bring people here. Not for revenge, not to gloat, but to finally show the truth. That I was never invisible. That I had always been enough. And when that day came, the proof would not be words shouted in desperation. It would be this house, standing tall and undeniable. I still remember the night it all shifted. I was sitting alone in my apartment, the soft glow of a lamp spilling across the walls, the silence pressing in like a weight. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the names in my contacts, and stopped on one. Rachel, my cousin, Aunt Marian's daughter. I hadn't spoken to her much over the years, but whenever we did, I felt something different. Honesty, no pretenses, no favoritism, just real conversation. My hands trembled as I pressed call, my heart racing as if I were waiting for a verdict. She answered on the second ring. Clara? You're calling late. Is everything all right? I swallowed, steadying my voice. Rachel, did you get an invitation from my parents for Christmas? There was silence on the other end, followed by a short, bitter laugh. My mom got a message. Said this year it's immediate family only, meaning your sister and her family. My chest tightened. I pressed further. So you weren't invited either? Aunt Marian? Grandma? Rachel's reply was quick, sharp. No one was. Not even Grandma. She called me earlier, furious. Said this hasn't happened in 30 years. I sank deeper into my chair. So it wasn't just me. They had cut everyone out just to make Christmas about Lillian. I thought back to last year when she had her first child. The entire holiday had become a celebration of her baby. The year before that, when she got her first law job again, everything revolved around her. And now, they didn't even bother pretending. They had stripped it down to only her. The call ended, and I sat in the dim room, snow falling thick against the window. Inside me, something stirred. For the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't just about me. This was about everyone else who had been cast aside. I picked up my phone again and typed a message to Rachel. If you and your family want, come to my lodge in Aspen. I'll handle everything. Her reply came almost instantly. You have a lodge? Clara, are you serious? I need to tell Mom. If you mean it, we'll come. Minutes later, my phone rang again. Rachel's voice bubbled with excitement. We're in. And I think some of the others will want to come too. That night, I began making calls. To my cousin Eli in Chicago, who had long stopped attending family gatherings out of exhaustion. To Aunt Marian. whose voice cracked with emotion when I invited her, to Grandma, who simply said, "Just tell me when to pack." One by one, they all agreed. In less than a day, I had over 15 people confirmed. Each yes felt like a brick laid in the foundation of something new. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for an invitation to someone else's table. I was building my own. And so, I began to plan. Not half-heartedly, not casually. I planned as though I were orchestrating something monumental. Because this wasn't just dinner. This was healing. This was giving people what they had been denied for years. I called Margaret, a chef from the mountains whose food carried the warmth of tradition. She walked into my kitchen, ran her hand across the granite countertop, and said, "This place makes me want to light the stove right now." When I told her I wanted a true Christmas feast turkey roasted with herbs, creamy potatoes, tangy cranberry sauce, apple pies with golden crusts, mugs of frothy eggnog, her eyes lit up. "No one will go home hungry," she promised. I decorated the lodge with a 12-foot tree that touched the ceiling of the grand hall, dripping with golden ornaments and crimson ribbons. A silver star gleamed at the top, bright as frost. Wreaths of pine and berries hung on every doorframe. Strings of warm lights wrapped around the balcony, so that at night, the lodge glowed like a gift resting in the forest. But I didn't stop at decorations. I thought of each person. I placed a stack of novels on Aunt Marian's nightstand, because she once told me reading was like living another life. I wrapped Lego sets for Rachel's children. I bought herbal tea for Grandma, the kind she always said was too expensive to indulge in. I placed a wool scarf beside it with a note that read, "So you can sit by the fire without worrying about the cold." Every detail mattered. Every room was prepared with care, every gift chosen with love. For once, no one would feel like a guest. This would be their home too. The night before everyone arrived, the lodge stood transformed. The tree shimmered with golden lights that danced against the cedar walls. The fireplace roared, its warmth filling the hall with a steady hum of crackling wood. The scent of cinnamon, orange peel, and pine drifted through every corner. I stood in the center of it all, my chest tightening with something I had never felt before. Anticipation. By morning, snow dusted the steps and railings, sparkling under the pale light. Margaret and her assistants bustled in the kitchen, the rich aroma of butter and thyme spilling into the hall. Tom, the caretaker, moved briskly with a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, reminding everyone to stack wood by the fireplaces and check the heating one last time. And then it began. The first SUV crunched up the drive, tires sinking into the snow. Rachel stepped out, tugging her coat tight, her breath visible in the crisp air. Her eyes widened as she looked at the lodge, her lips parting in disbelief. "Clara," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You built all this? And never told me?" I laughed, wrapping her in a hug as snowflakes melted on her hair. Behind her, her children darted from the car, their eyes lighting up as they caught sight of the towering tree. Within seconds, they rushed into the hall and froze in awe at the toy train circling its base. One by one, more cars followed. Eli arrived with a guitar slung over his shoulder, his new girlfriend shy until she smelled the apple pie wafting from the kitchen. Uncle Ray embraced me with a strength that needed no words, his silent presence steady as ever. Aunt Marian stepped inside, the scent of cedar pulling tears to her eyes. On her nightstand, she discovered the stack of novels I had prepared. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You remembered." Each guest wandered through the house, discovering little touches left just for them. Scarves draped on chairs. Names on doors. A puzzle table waiting in the library. It was as though the walls themselves whispered, "You belong here." By evening, the hall glowed with the warmth of family. There was only one long table, no kids shoved to the side. No one turned toward a wall. Everyone sat together, side by side, shoulder to shoulder. Musicians from town played soft carols on violin and guitar as candles flickered along the embroidered tablecloth. When Margaret carried in the turkey, its skin golden and glistening, brushed with melted herb butter, the entire table leaned forward instinctively. Platters of mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables followed, cranberry sauce shining red like rubies. I laid the carving knife beside the bird, then handed it to Uncle Ray, whose steady hand had always made others feel at ease. No speeches, no announcements, only a simple toast. "Thank you for coming." And with that, the table came alive. Stories crisscrossed the air. Laughter sparked and spread like fire. Plates passed from hand to hand. The children listened wide-eyed to tales of past Christmases, while adults reminisced about the traditions long lost. For the first time in my life, I sat in the middle of it all, not waiting for scraps of attention, not forcing a smile to fit into someone else's picture. I was part of it, and the look in Grandma's eyes confirmed it. She reached for my hand, her touch soft but steady. "Clara," she whispered, her voice raspy with age yet clear as truth. "You've given us a real Christmas. For the first time in years, we feel like we belong." Something in me broke open. The words I had longed for all my life. Tears stung, but they weren't bitter. They were warm, healing. After dessert, Eli tuned his guitar and strummed the first chords of Silent Night. The voices around the table joined, unpolished, imperfect, but heartfelt. Even the fire seemed to quiet itself to listen. Later we gathered for a photo in front of the tree. For once I didn't see a forced grin on my own face. I saw myself smiling freely, naturally, as though, at last, I was home. Night fell quickly over the mountains, wrapping the valley in silence broken only by the soft crackle of fire and the laughter spilling from the hall. Some of us drifted outside, wool blankets draped across our shoulders, mugs of mulled wine warming our hands. Sparks rose from the bonfire by the frozen lake, floating briefly before disappearing into the dark. Rachel settled beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. She leaned close, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Clara, thank you." For the first time, I saw my kids sitting in the right place. Not pushed aside, not invisible. Her words sank into me like a balm I hadn't known I needed. I pressed my forehead gently against hers and whispered back, "This is how it should have always been." When we returned inside, the hall had quieted to a glow of candlelight. Margaret hummed softly as she gathered trays, while Tom stacked fresh logs by the fireplace. The musicians promised to return the next evening to play again, their eyes shining with joy at being part of something so alive. I lingered alone for a moment, brushing my hand across the long table where crumbs of pie still lingered and candle wax glistened on linen. Outside the tall glass windows, the hills were painted black, dotted with the golden twinkle of balcony lights. For the first time, I understood why this Christmas was different. It wasn't about the food or the house or even the decorations. It was because no one had been left searching for their place. Every chair, every plate, every story had carried equal worth. The next morning, pale silver light filtered through the windows. I woke to peace, the kind of peace that felt like a gift in itself. But it didn't last long. My phone buzzed furiously on the nightstand. Dozens of missed calls. 6 from my mother, 4 from my father, and then a message from Lillian. The preview alone made my chest tighten. Really cheap move, Clara. Enjoy your little show. I walked down to the great hall, phone in hand, and found Grandma already awake, sipping her herbal tea by the fire. She smiled gently when she saw me. Last night was beautiful, Clara. The family needed that. Her words made me want to silence the phone forever. But it buzzed again this time. Another call from my mother. I couldn't avoid it. I answered, pressing speaker so Grandma could hear too. My mother's voice burst out, sharp and loud. Do you realize what you've done? The whole town is talking about your gathering. Even the pastor mentioned it in service. Do you know how we're being perceived right now? I kept my voice even. You told me this year it would be just Lillian and her family. So, I hosted my own. No trouble to anyone. A pause. Then her words rushed in, tumbling excuses. That's not what I meant. I thought you'd be too busy with work. And Lillian, I cut in, calm but firm. She's always the center, isn't she, Mom? The room froze. Grandma set her teacup down and spoke before I could. Her voice was steady, each word carrying the weight of decades. Judy, Robert, enough. You've spent a lifetime neglecting this child. Since she was little, you acted as if she were invisible. Last night, I saw her do what none of you ever did. She gave us a real Christmas. Silence filled the line. Then my father's uneasy voice broke in. Mother, you're exaggerating. We were only trying to keep things simple, Lillian. Grandma's voice cut through him like a blade. Simple? Is forgetting one child simple? Is praising one while ignoring the other fair? Last night, no one mentioned Lillian, and you know what? It was the best Christmas we've had in years. On the other end, there was nothing but breath. No defense. No denial. Only silence. I leaned back, my chest rising with something that felt like release. For the first time, someone had spoken the words I'd swallowed for years. I didn't need to add more. That's enough. We'll talk later if we need to. I ended the call, set the phone down, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to justify myself. I felt light, free. Grandma reached for my shoulder, her touch steady. In her eyes, I saw both sorrow and pride. Sorrow for all I had endured. Pride that I had finally risen beyond it. The rest of that Christmas unfolded like a dream I never wanted to wake from. Children built snowmen outside, their laughter ringing across the valley. Eli strummed his guitar near the fire, filling the hall with melodies that carried both joy and nostalgia. Aunt Marian read aloud from one of the novels I had left by her bedside, her voice wrapping the room in calm. And Grandma, she seemed lighter than I'd seen her in years. Her eyes sparkling as though some long-hidden weight had finally lifted. Each night we gathered again around the table. Not just to eat, but to talk, to listen, to stitch together pieces of our family that had been frayed for far too long. On the second evening, Rachel's youngest stood up on her chair and said, "This feels like the Christmas in the movies." Everyone laughed, but deep down we all knew this was more. This was real. One afternoon, as the snow fell thick and heavy outside, Eli pulled me aside. His eyes were serious, his voice low. "Clara, you changed something this week. You gave us all a place. Do you realize how big that is?" I shrugged, uncomfortable under the weight of his words. I just wanted us to be together. He shook his head. Number, you wanted us to belong, and you made it happen. You need to know. You're the reason we'll keep coming back. Later that night, as I stood alone on the balcony watching the snow drift in endless silence, I realized he was right. This wasn't a one-time gathering. This was the beginning of a new tradition. One not controlled by exclusion, favoritism, or silence. One built on presence, care, and truth. The morning everyone left, hugs stretched long at the doorway. Rachel kissed my cheek and whispered, "Promise we'll do this again next year." Grandma clutched my hand tight, her voice trembling. "Clara, you've given me peace I didn't think I'd see again." Eli left his guitar propped against the wall saying only, "For next time." As the last car disappeared down the snowy road, the lodge grew quiet again. I walked through each room, my footsteps soft against the wood floors. The tree still sparkled, the scent of pine still lingered, but the house felt different. Not empty, full. Full of memories, of warmth, of proof that family could exist without conditions. That evening, as I sat by the fire with only the crackle of flames for company, I thought of my parents and Lillian. I didn't know what they would say next, or how they might spin the story. But for once, it didn't matter. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer craved their acknowledgement. I had built something greater. I had built my own table. And now, as you've listened to this journey, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel invisible? Have you ever been pushed aside by the very people who should have cherished you? If so, hear me when I say this. You are not defined by their blindness. You do not need to keep begging for a seat at their table. You are capable of building your own. And when you do, you'll discover something I learned only recently: those who truly see you will gather, and together, you'll create a home richer than any approval you once chased. So as this story closes, take a moment, breathe. Think about what kind of table you want to build. Think about who you'll invite, and what kind of laughter will fill the room. And maybe, just maybe, the next chapter of your life will begin not with waiting, but with creating. Because sometimes, the most powerful gift you can give yourself is to stop knocking on locked doors and instead open one of your own.